Good afternoon and welcome to our first meeting in December. And our last meeting in December. This will be the last time we meet. We appreciate those of you in the audience tonight and those of you watching us on our Electric City Television. The invocation tonight will be given by Council Member Beatrice Thompson in respect to the flag has been led by Council Member Rick Laughridge. Please rise.
Let me pray. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this day. Thank you for the privilege you've given us to assemble in these council chambers to conduct the business of our city. Help us in our deliberation to make those decisions that are in the best interest of our citizens and pleasing and acceptable in your sight. And as we celebrate the blessed season of Christmas, help us to open the doors of kindness, love, and caring for one another, and to acknowledge the reason for the season, the birth of our Savior. We ask your blessings on our council, our citizens, our state, and our nation. We also implore your blessings on those who have been torn apart because of storms and other acts of havoc in their communities. Be with them and help them, I pray. And finally, dear God, most of all, let us all commit to ourselves to saying, Lord, let there be peace on this earth, and let it begin with me. Amen. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Tonight, before we get into the body of our meeting, we have a couple of special recognitions. And probably from the job that we do as council members, we know many of our 500 employees, but we have a special connection between division heads. Those are the ones that we interact with most. And tonight we have two that have been around since I've been around and been around for a long time, and they've announced their retirement. We hate to lose them because they give our organization structure, and they also provide leadership to our different divisions, not only within the people that they are responsible for, but throughout the whole organization. So what I'd like to do is maybe one by one, if we could, and I think I'll invite Kerry to my left up first. And Kerry, would you please come up? Kerry's been here. I think Linda's going to make some remarks too. I'm going to ask Linda to come up. But they all, both Kerry and Peggy, they get some other gifts. But we, as a council, want to present these plaques. And this plaque is presented to Kerry Stalnaker in appreciation for 42 years of loyal and dedicated service to the city of Anderson by the Anderson City Council on December 11th, 2017.
You know, it's, I think nights like this are very difficult because when you work in a place like we do, we consider this our family, and it's our city family. And I have to thank Kerry's other family for sharing him with us for 42 years. And it's been my pleasure and my privilege to have worked with you for all that many years. And I have to tell y'all, when I first came to work here, Kerry was somebody I met kind of right at the beginning. And he worked, at the time, we didn't have fancy names for our divisions and our departments and things like that. I think we probably called it something really fancy like the garage. That was where we defined Kerry. Now we're all about fleet maintenance, and so we've certainly graduated over time, and it's certainly over the past few years, it's definitely been under Kerry's watch that we've grown in complexity for the things that the city deals with, and I think we've grown in terms of the people who are around us and the things that we do, and I thank you very much, and I'm going to hug you too.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, council members, Linda, Dave, Peggy, Frankie, and all the other staff members that I've worked with over the years. I'd just like to thank the city for the opportunity that's been afforded to me over the years. I started as a mechanic helper and very quickly moved up to mechanic. And after 10 years, my boss retired. He recommended me over his two brothers who worked at Fleet to be the fleet manager.
That's pretty
And I remember Richard Woodruff offered me the job, a vehicle to take home, and you're on call. This is what we're going to pay you. And I said, Dr. Woodruff, I made more than that last year. Because of the overtime and being on call, I did make more than that, but I did eventually accept the job. And I was contemplating retiring about 7 years ago, and this fell into my lap. My wife says my stress level went down when I took this other 6 departments on. And I would just like to thank the city for everything that they've allowed me to do.
Thank you.
It is truly a family.
Thank you.
So thank each one of them. Thank you. Sorry. Get stopped out.
Don't sit down, please. Now I want to invite Peggy up, Peggy Maxwell, and sometimes when in an organization there are a couple of starting places that if it's not right, it's not right within the whole organization, and finance is one of them. And during my time here, we've always been on the right side of finances, and a lot of that is due to Peggy. And Peggy's plaque reads, presented to Peggy G. Maxwell, Finance Director, in appreciation for 30 years of loyal and dedicated service to the City of Anderson, the City Council, this December 11, 2017. Congratulations.
I don't even know where to start with Peggy. We certainly feel like, as far as the city's financial position and the health of our city under her leadership and over the years, she certainly kept that path very defined, and we have a lot to be grateful for and a lot to be proud of. And in addition to just knowing this line of work, which she's done so well, she's also managed to surround herself with people who have the same kind of philosophy in terms of looking after the city and the citizens and our financial well-being. And had it not been for her leadership, I'm certain we would have managed, but it's nice that we managed under your leadership.
Absolutely.
And I appreciate your friendship and that of Kerry's and the professionalism, and please know that we will miss you. But we know in the case of Peggy and Kerry, they both have added grandchildren to their families, and as people do in retirement, we wish them much love and joy in enjoying the other side of their families that they now have the chance to spend time with. So, thank you.
Appreciate it. Very kind words. I would just like to say that I too thank you, Paul, for the last 30 years that I've had here. I want to personally thank John Moore for those years ago that he gave me a chance, he gave me an opportunity. I surrounded myself, like Linda said, with awesome folks. Marvin Martin and Elizabeth Thompson were here, they're part of my team. And James Phillips, our auditor, with his guidance and help along the way, I've come to the furthest part that I can with the city of finance director, and I don't take that lightly. It's an honor to be a finance director of a city this size and city clerk treasurer. I couldn't have dreamed of that when I was at Clemson years ago. Like Linda said, the financial condition of our city, as you will see when David makes a presentation tonight, is it's the best I think it's ever been, and I am so proud of my team for that. We have loyal, dedicated, enthusiastic employees in the finance department. We've gotten many awards over the years for the CAFRs and for the budgets, and it's all a team effort. We couldn't have done it without your support, Linda's support, David. We strive to do a good job, and I'm sure after I'm gone, the team will continue to do well. I know that I've gotten a gift being able to retire as young as I am. I'm 56 years old, and the city has such an excellent benefit program that I'm going to get to retire and enjoy the time I have left. I like to say that I spent the first 30 years at the city taking care of the city, but I'm going to spend the next 30 years taking care of Peggy. I want to enjoy my life, enjoy my grandchildren, do the things that I haven't been able to do. I want to be healthy. I want to cook. I want to exercise. I want to enjoy all these things. I do. And I want to enjoy my husband, Keith. And a lot of people say that retirement's the end, but I think it's the beginning for me. And really, I do. Dr. Thompson, you have been the most supportive council member I could have ever dreamed of. She was here when I started, and the rest of you just came along after.
We're all aware of that.
Thank you.
I will be around City Hall occasionally, and thank you, Mayor. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Yes, it is.
I got one right here.
We have a presentation in regards to, as Peggy said, our financial strength, and we as a finance committee heard this presentation last week, and it's a very good presentation, and I'm going to tee it up for Linda to introduce our guest.
Thank you, Mayor. With us tonight, we have David Phillips from Greene Finney, LLP, and the Finance Committee did have the opportunity to hear a preview of this presentation, and as Peggy mentioned, and we're all very proud of, I think what you'll hear tonight will be very pleasing to you and pleasing to our citizens, that we are in really good financial health. And I'm going to turn it over to David and let him share more about that good news.
Give me 1 second. I'm trying to figure out how to advance the slide and stuff. All right, there we go. All right. Hopefully you have before you, you may have seen a management letter, a PowerPoint, and I think at the end of today they're going to hand out the CAFR. And that CAFR, of course, is pretty thick. Has a lot of good information. One of the things I would encourage you to think about looking at is in the back of the CAFR. It has 10 years of statistics. It gives you a good bit of history to kind of see how your trends have been in revenue and expenditures, various taxes and so forth. And it can also help you to understand when you look at, when we went through the Great Recession that we went through, you can see how low certain revenues went. And also now that we've been really in a good recovery, you can see how some of those growth revenues have really increased. So again, in the back of your capper that you receive, there's some really good financial information that help you with trends. But again, what we're going to do tonight, if it's okay, is we'll look through this PowerPoint. It's kind of a high-level summary of what took place this past year. One of my colleagues, he likes to change the PowerPoint around every few years. I'm a nerd accountant. I'd probably never change it. So it's a little bit different, but the substance is still there. So on the first page on the bottom there, on that slide, we'll look there. We talk about internal controls and the importance of internal controls. And the reason why is if we flip to the next page, this year, we've kind of decided we wanted to highlight to all of our clients some of the risk as it relates to fraud. And when they've done studies on fraud, they've always found that three things are present for fraud to occur. The first item is on the very top of the triangle, that there has to be a need in someone's life for why that they would commit fraud. Maybe someone's lost a job. They have a whole bunch of medical bills they can't pay for. The second item that must be present is on the bottom left of the triangle is a rationalization. They have to be able to rationalize why it's okay to commit fraud. Now, sometimes that rationalization is, I haven't gotten a raise in 5 years. Sometimes that rationalization is, hey, I work harder than Billy, and Billy makes more money than me, and that's not fair. Okay. The last item on that triangle is the bottom right. It's the only item that any entity has any control over. Is the opportunity. And the opportunity can be minimized if there's strong internal controls. And so one of the reasons why your organization and we as auditors harp on controls, because if one person can do it all, that if there's no checks and balances, bad things can occur. And one of the things paramount for us in the audit, if we come across significant internal control weaknesses, not only do we have to make management aware of that, we have to make you as counsel aware of that. Because how could you fix something if you don't know it exists? So again, like if we came across that bank reconciliations aren't being performed, we'd be writing that up. And you're going to be made aware of it. And probably management's already fixed it by the time I'm communicating it to you. But you need to be aware of something of that significance. All right, let's move ahead here. The city's responsibility on the next slide is for the financial statements to be accurate and complete. And if you flip to the next slide, our responsibility as the auditors is that we are to give you an opinion. And right now, you have a clean opinion, which is called an unmodified. If it was modified, we would say everything looks good except for something. You don't really want one of those. So right now, of course, you have an unmodified opinion. And again, we're looking at things from a materiality perspective. Think of about 1 to 2%. So if we lose less than 1%, there's no guarantee our audit procedures would catch that. Because if we audited to that level, we would be auditing even into the new year, and it would cost a lot more money. All right, well, let's look at your general fund. The fund balance there increased $1.1 million. That's a really nice increase there to $11.2 million. You have some various categories of fund balance, non-spendable related to prepaids and inventories of about $217,000. A little bit of restricted fund balance for victims advocate, but a good bit of unspent TIF revenues of about $658,000, and then some unspent lease proceeds of about $146,000. Remember, when you were putting together the fiscal year 18 budget, you appropriated part of fund balance for that budget, and that was about $518,000. So if you take all those constrained portions of fund balance, you're left with the portion of fund balance that has no constraints, and it's called unassigned. So your unassigned fund balance is $9.6 million, which is about 32% of your 2017 actual expenditures and about 35% of your 2000 budget expenditures. One of the reasons why it's a little lower in 2017 is you had a whole bunch of capital outlay in the general fund. And so when you have a lot more expenditures and your unassigned is already at a certain level, it's going to bring that percentage down. That's why next year it actually improves based on the current projection. The GFOA, which is the Government Finance Officers Association, it's kind of like the Bible of government. It recommends about at least 2 months. And you can see you're in good stead as it relates to that. All right, again, why do you want to have a strong fund balance? Remember, some of your revenues come in at certain times of the year. Property taxes, business licenses. Some of them, they don't just come in equally every month. So you want to make sure you have some cushion and some reserves there. It helps you for emergencies and unanticipated expenditures. It helps you for flexibility. It also helps you get better interest rates when you go to the market. And you've seen that with a lot of your debt issuances and some of your refundings. And again, with the unpredictability of the state on what could happen or what revenues you get there, it helps protect you against those uncertainties as well. All right, well, let's go to the next slide and let's look at general fund revenues. We're just going to do a quick summary of that as well. If you look there, you had total revenues of $26.8 million. You see the biggest pieces there, about $13 million, are in property taxes, TIF taxes, penalties, and interest. Another $8.9 million in licenses, franchise fees, and permits, and then the rest in those other categories. Your general fund revenues increased about $183,000, a little bit less than 1% over the prior year. Primarily, the increases in the area of licenses and permits, those growth revenues. As it relates to your budget, your actual revenues were about 6% or $1.6 million higher than you budget. And part of that is your staff can't always just assume what you got last year you're going to get next year. So they're being a little bit conservative, and then if it comes in even better over the prior year, you see what I'm saying, it ends up creating a stronger increase. You did have net transfers in of about $2.6 million. A lot of that is coming from your utility funds, the fee in lieu of taxes there. All right, well, let's look at your general fund expenditures. They were $30 million. The biggest piece being in public safety of $12.1, and then in public works and general government with the rest of about $8 million in other. As it relates to the prior year, your expenses were up $3.6 million, but there's a lot of one-time items here. Outlay in your general fund than compared to the prior year. If you looked at your kind of your normal operating costs, those were up, but that was primarily due, if you remember, to the cost of living increase of 2% that was granted this year. And remember, benefits keep going up every year as well. So both of those kind of affected the ongoing operating costs. As it relates to your budget, you were over budget $1 million, but it really comes down to that capital outlay that was approved, that you were paying for the downtown project and so forth. Then also, if you look, you had about $285,000 related to the telephone and mobile devices and other equipment, some of those costs as well. All right, your hospitality fee fund, we're just going to briefly look at that. Your hospitality revenues were $2.8 million, and they were up about $61,000 over the prior year, or 2.2%. Most of our urban are seeing about 5%, so you're a little bit below the average, but it was still, again, an increase over the prior year. Your expenditures were approximately $3.24 million compared to $2.45 in the prior year. And the overall fund balance decreased about $219,000, but it still left you with about a $1.44 million balance going forward. Remember, those funds just can't be used for everything. They have to be used for tourism-related expenditures. But there's a lot of things that would qualify for that, and you and your staff, of course, are fully aware of that. All right, well, let's look briefly at your enterprise funds. Your sewer fund had an increase in net position. They don't call it fund balance in the enterprise fund. It's called net position of $1.3 million compared to an increase of $791,000 in the prior year. Operating revenues increased about $108,000. Your sewer operating expenses increased about $775,000, and that's primarily due to depreciation as we've incurred cost useful lives. You also had transfers out to the general fund that were pretty consistent of about $629,000 between the current year and the prior year. All right, well, let's look at your water fund. Had an increase in net position of $524,000 compared to roughly the same amount in the prior year. Operating revenues increased about 2%, but your operating expenses also went up again due to cost to purchase water, and also due to the rate increase at Anderson Regional Joint Water System. So those were some of the drivers for the higher operating expenses. You transferred out $533,000 in both years. Again, that's the money that's going into the general fund that we saw the transfer from the other side when we were looking at the general fund revenue and expenditure slide. All right, well, we're briefly going to look at the pension liability. You not only have your own plan as it relates to your general employees, but you also participate in the state PRS plan. And unfortunately, you're doing really well as it relates to your own plan. You actually have a net pension asset of $2.1 million. Unfortunately, the state retirement plan isn't doing so well. Its liability has gone up to $12.7 million versus $11.1 million in the prior year. And a lot of that, again, is just that there's been very poor experience in investment returns in the state plan. So what you've seen, you've seen all the news in the paper of how they're raising rates. The hope is that by raising rates, they'll bring in more money into the state system, and over time, that will whittle down that pension liability. The bad thing about it is you have no control over it. And the way the GASB, which is the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, determines what your liability is, they say take your contributions into the PRS system, divided by all contributions into the PRS system, and whatever that percentage is, that's the percentage of the liability that you get. So again, if the liability goes down, your percentage will go down. If it goes up, your liability will go up. And remember, it has no impact on the governmental funds, but it does affect your enterprise funds and your government-wide financial statements as well. All right, so the reason why I briefly looked at the pension is because we take a quick snapshot of these government-wide GASB 34 statements. What they are intending to do is to look at you as corporate America is looked at. Let's add all of your assets, all of your liabilities, and come up with what your net worth is as a business. Now, the parallelism doesn't work so well as in the fact that you're not going to be sold. But in corporate America, that helps someone get a gauge of what a company's worth. So if we take your assets, if you look there on the slide, it's $214 million, of which $161.7 is your capital assets. That's your buildings. That's your sewer lines. That's your fire trucks and other equipment. But then you also have cash and investments of $31 million, and then other assets, receivables, and deferred items of $21.4 million. If you look at your liabilities, you have $131.6, of which $113.5 million are your own long-term debt and other long-term obligations. But there's that pension liability coming in at $12.7 million. And then you have other liabilities of accounts payable, and payroll, and so forth. So if you take the assets minus your liabilities, that's your net equity, it's your net position on the top of that slide. And that is $82.4 million. The key number there is really the unrestricted. You have $8.1 million unrestricted, but in reality, it probably should be higher if you really added the pension items back, because it's not like you're going to have to pay off that pension liability tomorrow. What you're going to see is that your rates are going to increase, and your budget, as your staff puts together a budget, you're going to know your benefit costs are going to keep going up. And that's how they're going to get you, that's how it's going to affect you in the future. All right, well, let's briefly look at your capital assets. They were $161.7 million, a decrease. They decreased $584,000. You had a good bit of additions this year, $3.7 million in the governmental activities, and about $3.3 million in your business type activities, and we list what some of those projects were. But remember, on these government-wide statements, if we capitalize them, we have to depreciate them over their estimated useful lives. And so then you have depreciation of 2.5 and 5.1 million. And you notice that exceeds the additions, and that's why your capital asset balances went slightly down in the current year. All right, on the long-term obligation front, your long-term obligations decreased 4.4 million to 113.5. Remember, most of that on all sides is just making regularly scheduled principal payments. But this year, remember, you did issue a lease purchase for about $2.5 million for various vehicles and equipment. So you had that lease purchase come through, but you had even more principal repayments that exceeded that. Your debt service payments for fiscal year 18, so it's kind of like your mortgage payment for fiscal year 2018, is about $2.3 million for your governmental activities and $7.5 million, or a total of $9.8 for the whole overall city. All right, from an accounting auditing standpoint, there's one big change coming as it relates to retiree health care. The good thing is you don't really have near the possible OPEB liability balance that a lot of our other governments. We're looking at it might increase your liability to over $200,000. We have governments that might be 10 or 20 million. And that's because your plan isn't just so rich that hey, we're going to pay 100% when someone retires. We have some entities that are doing that, and that liability is very huge. So again, that will take effect next year. Next slide on the compliance standpoint. As we did the audit, looking at your controls as it relates to your financial statements, we did not come across any financial statement findings, any significant deficiencies or material weaknesses as it relates to the financial statements. We did have one finding as it relates to one of your single audit programs, CDBG, and you can see it up there. You were in excess of the period, the timely expenditure standard, and if you don't get that down by next May, you could lose out on some grant monies. Now, your staff has already developed a total workout plan. Your committee met on it. It's been presented to HUD, and they've reviewed and approved it. So we feel like hopefully you will be able to comply by the next time that they look at it. But let's just say next May comes around and you're still over the 1.5 standard, you could lose some of your funding next year. That's the risk that you have there. So again, we provided some details there. When you finally get the CAFR, in the back there's a whole section writing up that finding if you want to see it in more detail. So I just want to let you know kind of where that comes in. So when you see this, you can go look at it in more detail, and feel free to talk to your staff, because they've been on top of trying to address this. All right, let's go to the next management letter. You have like a separate letter we provide. If there's disagreements we have with management, if there's errors that your management did not want to book an entry for, we have to tell you. There's no issues like that. It's kind of a boilerplate letter. Again, in summary, you have an unmodified opinion, and you really have good financial condition. Every year, I feel like over the last few years, I keep seeing more and more improvement. You're beginning to be able to build some fund balance that will help you deal with ongoing infrastructure needs, capital project needs, and just ongoing operating costs if things come up. I know it went quick. Any questions? Any comments?
Well,
I'm impressed.
it is a lot, but we appreciate you working with our team in regards to our financial health. But if we don't have any questions of Mr. Phillips, thank you.
Thank you. I did want to say, I really do want to miss Peggy. I bet she is right that there's really good, capable staff. She's done a great job of training people. She's had a lot of people leave here and become directors of finances at other places. So that tells you her foresight in trying to bring good people in the organization. So it's going to be sad, but I told her she can still come back to our lunches. She doesn't have to lose out if we get together for our audit lunch. I want her to come back. So, all right, thank you.
Good. Thank you, David. Minutes of our November 27th meeting have been distributed. Are there any corrections or additions to the minutes?
Mayor, I make a motion that we approve these minutes and also make a note that it was a record. Mr. McEwen, I make a motion to approve these minutes.
So noted. We have a second first by Mr. Harris, a bunch of seconds. Second by Mr. Laughridge and others. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Those minutes pass unanimously in a very good way. Our old business, one item of old business requests second reading of ordinance 17-14 establishing the 2018 general election. Ms. McConnell?
We do have our next general election, which is scheduled for Tuesday, April the 3rd, for the seats, mayor, seats 1, 3, 5, and at-large seat 7. These are 4-year terms, and the key dates are the filing period is Thursday, July the 18th to February the 1st. Registration and Elections Office. Anyone who is planning to vote in that election would need to register to vote by March the 3rd in order to be able to vote in that election. We would recommend this for second reading.
Thank you. Any questions, comments?
Make a motion we accept it on the second reading.
First by Mr. Chapman, second by Mr. Newton. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It passes unanimously on the second and final reading. We've got 4 items of new business, and our first item is request consideration of an appointment to the Municipal Election Commission. Ms. McConnell?
Well, part of our being in the election business is that we have a competent board of 3 people or commission of 3 people who help us during election time. Mr. David Ford has served on the commission previously. Each of these commission members serve 6-year terms. Mr. Ford's term has expired, but he is willing to continue to serve on the commission, and we certainly recommend his reappointment. He serves along with Clara Humphrey and Renee Fields York, and their really active time on this commission is during the election period itself. So the staff certainly recommends Mr. Ford continuing in this capacity with a term that would end December the 31st, 2023.
Thank you. Any questions or comments?
I would like to request that we go ahead and vote for Mr. Ford for the Municipal Election Commission.
We have first by Ms. Laughridge, second by the Mayor Pro Tem. Further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously, and I'm sure that echo council's appreciation of the 3 members, Mr. Ford and Ms. Fields York and Ms. Clara Humphreys, for their service to the city of Anderson. Just curious, is the 6-year term a statewide mandate? Is that an election commission? Is that?
It's what our code says.
Our code?
Yes, I don't know if that's statewide or not. No one has ever complained about a 6-year term because we have an election obviously every 2 years. So we try certainly not to overwork those volunteers on that commission, and I think for that reason it's not a big deal.
Good, thanks. Our next item is request consideration of an appointment for municipal judges. Ms. McConnell?
2 years ago, the city embarked on sort of a expansion of our court system. It is definitely one of the segments of our municipal government that is an important piece of what we do. And when we did expand our management of our court system, that involved meeting requirements of having bond court twice every day, 2 times every day, and that's 7 days a week. So the court business is the type of business that goes on. It's not 9 to 5, it goes on all the time. We needed an expansion of that judicial capacity in order for us to be able to conduct those activities in a timely fashion. And as such, Josh Allen was appointed as our chief judge. In addition to that, we had assistant judges of Richard Thompson Jr., Robert B. King Jr., Gertz Eaton, and Stacy Blair. They had terms of, they were appointed to 2-year terms, and those terms expired at June 30th of this year. And as y'all know, certainly just because their term expired at June 30th, they can continue and have continued to serve in that capacity at your pleasure until the consideration for their appointment or reappointment. So they've been trained and they've been doing a good job with their respective terms of court and their responsibilities. You have the opportunity to appoint them for a 2-year term, but the state law says 2-year term as a minimum, but not more than 4 years. The Public Safety Committee has met on this and reviewed their the progress and the activities that these judges conduct on a regular basis, and felt that their recommendation to you was to continue with the system that we have in place with Josh Allen as the chief judge of the municipal court, and to reappoint the other judges, assistant judges, for their 2-year terms, which would officially run from July the 1st of 2017 until June the 30th of 2019. And just as a footnote, we do have an extra judge, which is Matt Lawless, and Matt serves as a magistrate, so we actually contract with Anderson County for his services. But because he's under contract with us, there is no term associated with his service. So the request and recommendation to you tonight is to reappoint our existing judges, Josh Allen, Richard Thompson, Robert King, Gertz Eaton, and Stacy Blair, for 2-year terms.
Thank you. Had the opportunity of sitting in on the Public Safety Committee meeting a few weeks ago. Are there any members that would like to make comments of the committee? Mr. Chairman.
We certainly appreciate everything they do, and with that, I would recommend that we approve it for general approval as presented.
Second.
First by Mr. Chapman, second by Mr. Laughridge. Further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you. Our third item is request consideration to purchase mobile printers for the police department. Ms. McConnell?
Certainly this is not news to you all tonight in terms of what the ultimate mission is. In the police department, one of the things that we've been moving toward in the whole state, and this really begins in earnest as a mandate at 2018, at the beginning of the year, where the police department will be issuing electronic tickets rather than paper tickets, based upon what the state is requiring us to do. We've been moving in that direction. You will remember, as a bit of history, that we had already been using Chromebooks or small computers in our police vehicles, and this is the next step, getting us prepared for the electronic tickets beginning at the first of the year. Chief Stewart is with us tonight, and I'll ask him to come forward and explain some of the details about what we're asking to purchase tonight to put us in proper stead with the state. Chief?
Thank you, Ms. McConnell. This was a partnership with the IT department. Jason Nixon's here also tonight. We started in July with the new record management system, as you remember, the jail management system, but we're moving to the point now where as the mandate is coming closer to January 1st, this was instituted by Governor Haley when she was still in office, that we all go to the electronic tickets. That still means we're going to print one out and the violator is going to get a copy. But the advantage is, as soon as the ticket's written, it's going to be submitted to the Department of Public Safety in Columbus. It will be all the transfer of records electronically. With that being said, we're at the point now where we need to get at least 50 printers to equip our street crimes unit, our traffic division, and all of our patrol officers. As you'll see, the request is for 50 Hewlett-Packard printers, which are on state contract. That amount is $12,902.50. We also look for the printer stands, as we have different vehicles, Chargers, Fords, and Chevrolet Impalas. We have different stands. We did ask for 57. There's more stands just simply for the reason that we were going to put stands in the spare cars. So when we have a regular line car go down, we can just put that printer in a spare car. So that's the reason you see a discrepancy. That amount is $15,973.45, and the total would be $28,875.95.
Thank you, Chief. Any questions?
That's gonna save time, Chief.
Yes, ma'am. The best part is that it's just all transferred electronically. There's no more handwritten ink that has to be mailed from the court after a disposition. It'll all be done electronically with us in the PD as well as the court.
So it would be, you stop someone and give them a ticket, then they will be given a copy at that point.
Yes, ma'am. There'll still be a printed hard copy that they would get. The only reason that we would need any more copies than that is if someone they were arrested, they would have a copy, we would give a copy to the booking officer.
Chief, or other law enforcement friends?
Yes, sir. There's option that all these tickets could be put in through a web portal, which we could continue to write a blue ticket, but that means someone has to manually, at a desk, put all these into a web portal, then mail them continually. It's the practice is. This is the step in the right direction where we want to be exactly where technology's at.
You're basically cutting out another person.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman?
And with this, I mean, the tickets that we currently use, we still have to purchase those tickets currently until the printers get here. So there's cost savings in
Yes, sir.
product that we're not having to buy now, and plus saving time. So I think it's a great thing.
Any other questions discussed?
I'd like to request that we go ahead and purchase these printers.
Second.
First and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, Chief.
Thank you,
The
Mr.
new printers. Our last item of new business is request consideration of an ordinance regarding the sale of city-owned property located at the corner of East Market and South Main Street. Ms. McConnell.
It's very good to be able to share this information with you tonight for your consideration. I think we've talked about over time how the city of Anderson has invested in the infrastructure downtown in order to attract business and industry and residents and the quality of life that we have downtown. And because of that investment that you've made over time, it has resulted in certainly what we've seen. Anderson, the city of Anderson has become a rather hot commodity in terms of the amount of interest that we're generating from people in other parts of the business world. Their eyes are being focused on the city of Anderson, and in particular in this case, focused on downtown. This year, put out a request for proposals regarding some city-owned property. One of them is our real estate that's located at South Main and East Market Streets. What we're going to discuss tonight is a proposal for the potential use of that property. And because this involves the discussion of negotiations that may lead to contractual arrangements and the sale of this property, the staff would recommend that we discuss this in executive session. Specifically, the discussion of negotiations incident to proposed contractual arrangements and the proposed sale of property owned by the city.
So in that regard, I would entertain a motion to go into executive session.
So moved.
First by Mr. Newton, second by Mr. John Roberts. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? We stay in executive session, and we're going to stay in here,
Yes.
and we'll ask everyone except the management team to stay in.
I don't remember what.
I would entertain a motion to come out of executive session.
So moved.
First by Mr. Laughridge.
Second.
Second by Dr. Thompson. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We stand out of executive session. During executive session, we had a discussion in regards to negotiation of a piece of property that the city owns, the sale of that property by the city located at the corner of East Market and South Main Street. At this time, we have authorized our city attorney to continue into negotiations in regards to the sale of this property, and with the intent on having, after we, someone will make a motion to pass this on the first reading.
I make a motion to pass on first reading, Mayor.
Second.
First and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And the second part of that is we have a meeting on January 11th,
January the 8th.
January the 8th, in regards to the second reading of this proposed sale of city property. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
First by Mr. Newton, second by Mr. Laughridge. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We stand adjourned.